we can do, and if we have to shut a hole down on this golf course, we can still play 18 holes on it. Unfortunately, it's a par 3. I mean, if you had a par 4, you could have all sorts of tees and it had the same rating. But I mean, if something has to be done here, you can come out here and play 18 holes of golf and double up on it. And we've done that. We've done that during all this renovation and everything. We were able to skip around and play a par 70 or a 69 golf course. So whatever might happen, you've got a unique situation here, which we didn't plan on, but we inherited, which is unique. Putting in a new sprinkler system is going to take a whole lot of play for 5 or 6 days or a week or something like that. We can still play 18 holes of golf. If there's a blight on a green or whatever else, we can still play 18 holes of golf. So I'm surprised that there aren't more golf courses built today with 19 holes.
Just as a saving for shutting a hole down.
Yeah.
You mentioned the word sprinklers, sprinkling system. I know Tillinghast put the first sprinkling system in Texas, in the United States. He designed it and put it in, which was something. But tell us a little bit of your history of what you saw on sprinkling systems, good, bad, and different. And I know there's the pluses and the minuses and everything that on a golf course because of opinion of people as well as dollars spent and so on. And I'm sure you've seen that.
Well, you know, there probably wasn't too much difference in sprinkler systems when we put the first one in here, because it was exactly what they had at other courses. You went down the middle of the fairway and you put the lengths of pipe in and you attached the sprinkler head with a quick connect on the thing, and that was it. Went all the way around, and you had the scallops and everything else on the thing. But that was the state of the art. And let's say that was 1955, something in that range on the thing. We got the thing in. That's all anyone else had on it. Now, the other thing, when you got that, you know, when do you sprinkle it? They sprinkled at night because people were playing golf. That greenskeeper, I mean, they were on a night shift. They had gone and put that head in, and those old diesel pumps were gone, and sprinkle all 18 holes on this thing. The guy was, you know, he'd start at 10 o'clock at night when it closed down, and he'd be still at 4 o'clock in the morning trying to get around moving these things. Yeah. So it was labor intensive. You had it, but someone had to work. And of course, later on, when Sal was president, they put in the first new technique sprinkler system, which, and then we modified it that, and they're still modifying. And we're talking about modifying now with expanding the pump house, which was built in 1970. We built that for the new sprinkler system, and now, of course, the state of the art is you put tanks in there. I mean, not little tanks, big tanks, which you put your chemicals in there, fertilizer, and you can fertilize with that thing through your sprinkler system. So there's, you know, and then you go to more heads so that you're not getting the scalloping thing running down, and you try to get into the rough to get some water there where the trees are leaching all of the water out. That's still a problem. A golf course shouldn't be played in the woods because the trees just eat up too much of the moisture. What you want is strategically planted trees, but there aren't too many of them are like that. Usually people get trees in order as vacant land and trees grew up. But trees are, you know, a woods is a detriment to a golfer. You can't do anything in that except bang into it and ricochet the ball around, and you can't grow grass and so on. So the state of the art has changed. I mean, the whole thing. We got pictures here. It was a movie of Bobby Jones playing Lakewood and Westwood Country Club in the early 30s when Bobby Jones was it and everything. And you should see those movies. They are interesting. Incidentally, the one thing that's in those movies that you'll recognize, forget the layout, because there aren't any trees, I mean, it was still a farm, are the benches that were at the tees, those metal benches, which are tremendous things. We don't use them anymore. I don't know why. Should have some around the putting green here. You should put some on the range so you hit some balls, you can rest and hit some more, and they're comfortable. And there's 20 of them. I count them. Just 20 of them sitting over there out in the weather.
Yeah, over the maintenance shop.
Yeah, right. And they have to be used. But anyways,
where were those built?
They had to be. They're the original equipment. They had to be built in the 20s. on the thing.
Okay.
And Charlie allowed to bring them in and paint them up. I mean, they got as much paint on them as they got metal on, but boy, they are comfortable, and they're terrific. But we used to have them out on the range, so if your wife or your mother or whoever else or the kids, you could sit on a bench and you could hit balls out. We ought to put a couple of them around the putting green here, just so that when you putt, I'll sit down, wait a minute for someone to come along, you got a place to sit. Everyone thinks just because there's a cart you can sit in it. Well, the carts are all around the corner. They're, you know, and we do have one on number 1, which is kind of handy when it stacks up. You can sit down there. So that's one of the assets that we still have, and I hope someone doesn't come up with the idea of, well, we don't use them, let's get rid of them. They ought to be used. We don't need them on every tee or anything like that, but we could use a lot of them, and they could be used in a lot of places. You could even put one out here by the little putting green on number 1, you know, or whatever. But anyways, it was interesting. You watched Bobby Jones play west of and if you think the game's the same, just watch that. They're on that putting green. It's all wrist. You know, there's none of this stuff. It's all wrist. I mean, you'd sock that ball for all you're worth on those. You know, on it. So it's the game's changed.
There were about 6.
Yeah, oh, yeah, right. But
Bang it.
so.
Talk a little bit more about what you know about the formation of the club, as far as the Masonic Lodge. It was back in the early 20s, and
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about that. My father was a Mason. I am not. But the original deal was with here in Acacia, which is a Masonic, I don't know if it's an order or
Lodge.
Well, it's a lodge, whatever. But anyways, this was the Lakewood Masonic Lodge in Lakewood, still exists, everything else. I think Harlan Saxon belongs to that. Dad belonged to Dover Lodge. But anyways, they were going to build this great recreational complex. And if you look at it, I mean, they had softball field, horseshoe pits, they had badminton, they had tennis. They did have 2 tennis courts out there built, and they went by the wayside.
You remember where those were located?
Oh yeah, they're right out there on the driving range to the right. You could, because it was a little depressed area and the thing on it, you could always identify. And of course, they still had some of the posts were still in and that, so I could take you right out and walk you right to where the 2 tennis courts were. And I used to always refer to it, you know, I hit that ball, yeah, I hit it over the tennis court, or what you mean, a banana ball on the thing. But you know, there wasn't anything else out there. You couldn't say left of the tree, the right of the tree. It was in regard to where the old tennis court was. But they were very ambitious deals, and I'm sure even probably at that point they would probably build a clubhouse if they were going to do it, if everything continued, and you'd have living quarters like Baltusrol or even Canton Brookside and that sort of thing. It never happened just because of the times they got started where they got the golf course in, and the Depression hit and the war hit and the whole thing went by the wayside. They had, I mean, there was no way, the only salvation was you had to take in other people besides Masons because they couldn't support it during the, well, you couldn't support anything during the Depression. And there was a few of the old timers, John Hogan, that just managed to make sure everything got cut, the greens got cut. And again, back in those days, Westwood, I mean, Lakewood, I mean, the clubhouses closed down. They weren't open all winter long. I mean, they closed down 1st of October. I don't even know if there was a men's grill at stay. I don't think so, because we always went in, Dad went into Westwood, and there was always rejuvenation to do before the golf season started. So the country club closed down on the thing. That's just the way things were done. So it was an ambitious endeavor. It didn't work out. It didn't work out for Acacia, except for the golf courses are the remnants of it, and they're very nice. And they all started out with a old farm clubhouse. In fact, I was just back from being up in Wisconsin, and we played golf up there with our friends, the Manners and everything, and he grew up in a dairy farm. And you go, and I said, you know, up here in a beautiful country, I'm telling you, it's beautiful, rolling hills, and I said, every golf course you see here has got a barn as a maintenance building. He said, you're probably right. They bought the farm and kept the barn there. And barns are big buildings. Don't kid yourself. We drive by them. You can do a lot of repairs in a barn, kind of thing. So, anyways, there have been all good years, good friends, good progress, good times. I guess the only disappointment is that I still can't hit the ball as far as Vic Ermel does on that thing without cheating. And of course, I've been known to do that.
Let me go back here at the history of it. The Masonic Order bought the property, wanted to make it into a huge recreational complex. Started with the golf course, tennis courts, baseball diamonds, horseshoe pits, maybe badminton or whatever. Then they obviously could not afford to maintain it, so they sold it, I would assume, to some individuals.
Well, they reorganized. They didn't sell it to, and they just reorganized instead of being the Lakewood Country Club Land Company, which is what each member owned a chunk of the land company. They dissolved that, and then became, you got a share of stock in the Lakewood Country Club as such. Now, a lot of and for a share of this, you got a share of that.
Right.
Now, a lot of the guys, of course, they got a share of that, but you got the share. Remember all that deal we had with selling the guy said, well, I have a share in the old land company. Mm-hmm. Well, that was dissolved, kind of thing, and you end up, and then we had that whole, and again, Stouffer worked on this in spades. It's a good thing you bring that up, because what happened, you'd join the club and they give you a share of stock. And then you get transferred, or you move, or you die, or whatever else, and they never got the stock back. So it ended up that when we went to build the building and all this and do these things, and we had to get a mortgage, it was a vote of the stockholders. You had to have a majority. Well, they had 3,000 shares of stock outstanding, and of which you had 250 in-house. The thing, and this thing, and so you got to come up with some legal means. So they started, and Westwood the same way, started getting on this thing to get this stock back, and I'm not giving up, including our friend Jim Carney, I'm not giving up that share. This is after the land company, giving up because they had ownership in it if the highway came through. So they got working, and then finally came up with a 2-for-1 split on the thing, so that you could get 2 shares for 1, but you had to activate it. Well, if you didn't activate it, you still had 1. So now you could build up, and they did get shares in, and you got $10 for a share of stock. And I said, what the hell what am I going to do with $10? I might just hang on to it. So it was a hard sell. You'd say, well, your great grandfather or your grandfather had, and those things, they were lost. They were lost. They had records, but I mean, you're sending notices out, and you had to do that every year at the election for officers. Send notices out. This stuff would all come back. There was no, and who inherited it, the stock, and who had it. And we just had it on record. So they finally got that cleaned up and straightened out. But that was a big endeavor. A number of guys worked on that diligently. Called on the phone, call them up. You're not going to get anything. You might as well. And your father or grandfather had a great time out here, and this would be a nice benefit to the people that are here.
I remember Stouffer telling me one time that they had people who were fellows who owned the stock. They found him. He was on his deathbed. And they asked him, could he sign the stock over back to the company? And with that, then it supposedly did happen.
Oh.
They found some people out of the state and literally.
Oh, they're in California.
Yeah.
They were all over. Okay, you can imagine. Now, this started probably in when they finally got into it and trying to get as much of it back, in 1970. Because they were already able to build the clubhouse, and Broadview Savings had the mortgage on it, everything. These people were literally all over the world. I mean, they were every place, and some of those people had joined Lakewood and never even saw it. I mean, they were just a Masonic thing to do. Yeah, we'll join and all the rest of it.
Just to support it.
Support it, and they were entitled. So it was.
Well, just one last question, Don, to
Okay.
kind of wrap things up. You've been through a lot here with, your history and your family, and how has the social aspect of the club changed over the years?
Well, I would say, and it's just signs of the times again. Back when we joined, and even you, Vic, and everything else, I mean, to belong to a club was a social prestige. I mean, this is my club. I can remember come up here, my aunt was from Scotland and everything else, and to have a valet park the car, I mean, she never dreamt that would, she must have thought I was a billionaire or something. But I mean, so that was a social upgrade from what she knew was, not in her lifetime, but I mean, to think that you belong. So when you joined a club, and let's just use our clubs on Westwood or Lakewood and everything else, I mean, it made a statement. And you could bring people out to your club. You could play golf at your club. You could swim at your club. You could go to dances at your club. And it was your club. And probably that's one of the big things that probably made that Westwood Lakewood Jamboree. I mean, now you had two groups together. You knew everybody. So it was a social, prestigious situation that you were dealing with. And you couldn't get into another club. I mean, you couldn't say, well, let's just go to Westwood and have lunch or play golf. No, I mean, you couldn't get your foot in the door unless you were with a member, or here, or wherever else. It's just the way things were, or the Union Club, or the whole thing. You see a different situation now. I think the next generation, which they're not joiners, they are not. And the next generation is like our kids. My kids are a little bit old, but I mean, they're in the 30s, 40s, 50s now, the baby boomers. They're not joining Kiwanis. They're not joining Rotary clubs. They're not into so much the civic situations that everyone else was. And I think probably our generation, our parents' generation, were involved in because it was more hard work and more things, and you had to get an education, and I didn't get it, but we're going to see that you get it. So it was a whole different philosophy. Now it's a matter of, well, where are we going on vacation for 2? We'll go to Hawaii. I mean, that was unheard of. I mean, first of all, it took you a week to get over there in a boat, or a week to get over to Britain in a boat, everything. So, I mean, the whole social situation has changed. Plus, Florida opened up, I mean, after the war, when they found out you can air condition these places. Do you think anyone would be living in Atlanta or Phoenix, I mean, without air conditioning? And then you got airplanes, get you down there in a half a day. So the people you see here and there now aren't, the club is just an amendment. I mean, it's nice, but it's not the place to be identified with. And so it's just, I think, a different situation. They're going to use it, and they're not going to use it. I mean, I think Ryan has done a marvelous job, and the staff here, of putting out brochures, come to this, come to that, let's do this, let's do that, more so than we've done in years. But the social scene is just a lot different. There's a lot more competition for your discretionary dollars.
Right.
You know, it used to be you went to a movie on a Friday. You had a day you went to a movie. You know, well now you got just like, well, there's just a lot of.
You go to Cedar Point, you can go to.
Oh yeah,
Four
right.
Seasons,
You
a lot more restaurants.
yeah, you can go out to dinner. I mean, I like my folks in Powell years too, Vic. I mean, they didn't go out to dinner. I mean, the only time you went to dinner if we were out of town. I mean, mother cooked in, and if someone was coming, they came